it's Liz. Welcome back to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And I am thrilled because today I am going to be speaking with somebody who actually is heart and humanity in pretty much everything that he does. And that is someone who I've come to call a friend, someone I greatly respect and admire, Roger Carstens. And Roger is formerly the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, SPIHA. And I also, in saying this, I sometimes wish that we had never met because we met under pretty terrible circumstances.
Yeah.
After my great niece Abigail was taken hostage, one of the first people that I reached out to and that said, I'm here to help you, was Roger Carstens. And really what that meant was that there was somebody with a heart and somebody that was so human in the most difficult times saying, I'm here for you. And my team is here for you. And so I think that's just the way I can introduce you, Roger, which is sort of just to say, like, there was this tragedy, but in this blessing is that we became friends, but I just admire you. And I'm so grateful because this podcast is about heart and humanity. And it's about leadership, diverse leadership. And it doesn't mean someone needs to be elected, but it really goes down to going and becoming a leader in whatever you believe in or whatever your career is. So thank you. And we're going to talk much more about you, but I just want to say thank you for being here.
Hey, Liz, I'm grateful to be here. If I can have 10 seconds, it was an honor and pleasure to meet you. And you hit it. You know, you never want to meet someone in those circumstances. And I used to also tell families that I can't wait until I never have to see you again, which should be an insult in most worlds. But what it's saying is one day you're going to get Abigail Moore back and I don't have to see you. And yet you and I worked together. I'd say mainly through your efforts, you brought Abigail back. And yet we've stayed in touch. And I've been grateful for our friendship, our partnership. You've stayed in the fight after Abigail came back home. You didn't quit. You kept going to bring other hostages home. You've cared about other people from other countries. This is now a broad topic in your life. And I really appreciated you penning this book because this gets into the leadership part. You know, you authored this book and it's what you said. You don't have to be an elected leader. You can be an author. You can be a podcaster. Frankly, you can be someone who's listening to this podcast, driving to work and just doing your thing. But leadership is something that we all can give to each other. And I'm grateful for a chance to talk about these topics. So grateful that we're still friends, grateful that Abigail's back, and grateful that you're in my life.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to have a unique conversation, but what I always like to start with is like, where did you come from? And, you know, what was it like to grow up? Because people see you now. And I think that it's really interesting because what I've learned is that people want to know where people come from, what it was, your family. And you are from Spokane, Washington.
Yeah.
And what was it like to be growing up there? And what was your family like?
Boy, you've stumped me. Usually I'm ready for all these questions. Like I'm gonna have to sputter around a bit, but you know, I had an idyllic childhood. I grew up in about middle class childhood in Spokane. I was only child, so Christmas was all about me, not a brother and sister, and that was kind of cool, I thought. You know, later on, my wife was wondering if we should bring a second kid in, and we did, and it was wonderful. But I had to actually spend a little time telling her and extolling the virtues of being an only child. It's pretty cool. But as an only child growing up in Spokane, for whatever reason, I went to the foreign policy side early. And, you know, people find this. You know, some kids want to play Army and they know they're going to be soldiers at a young age. Other kids are worried about money and this, that, and the other, and they're going to go off to finance and become bankers. Other kids want to build and they become architects or they work on construction sites. You know, you get a sense of what you want to do when you're young. And when I was 11, I was reading foreign policy stories. And I know I've told you this before, but at age 11, I was reading about the genocide that was taking place in Cambodia. And probably something I shouldn't have been reading about at age 11. But, you know, back then we just had Time, Newsweek, and the local paper. And boy, I read everything I could on it. And I felt that if I could only be a part of whatever could stop that. And I don't know if anything can really stop a genocide in motion. You know, I was involved tangentially with some of the things that happened in Rwanda. And I thought, what stops a genocide? But I know that in 1975, I would think to myself that if I could, I'd like to devote my life to whatever organization or thing could stop a genocide. And back then, growing up on John Wayne movies, to me, it was the U.S. Army. You know, I think about the U.S. Army in World War II. landing, in Northern Africa and Italy and later at Normandy and working country by country to liberate people and later on as a bulwark against communism and things like that. And I thought the U.S. Army is where I want to go. Back in Spokane, I didn't know about the United Nations, didn't know much about journalists, didn't know much about nonprofits. So to my mind, the U.S. Army was the greatest human rights organization in terms of getting out there and actually freeing people, and that's where I headed. But maybe to tie into something you said, when I think about how you stop a genocide, I'm not so sure it's the U.S. Army. I'm not so sure it's the United Nations or NGOs or journalists. It does get into this thing of love and leadership and your heart. You stop genocides by getting in front of it. You stop genocides, I think, by exhibiting this leadership that you like to talk about and this love that you believe so important. But absent that, when the genocide's in route and it's happening, how do you stop something like that? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. But yeah, in Spokane, Washington, I felt the U.S. Army was my best chance to try to help those that were most vulnerable. And maybe lastly, I'll say, in heading off to West Point in 1982 and later on going into Special Forces, whose motto is De Oppresso Liber, to free the oppressed, I felt like no matter what I tried to do, I wanted to try to help those who were most vulnerable. And later on, after I left the Army, that played into my work in the nonprofit community in places like Jordan, where I spent a lot of my life trying to get food into southern Syria to feed those who are internally displaced.
Yeah.
I was all over the map.
It's
I'm sorry, Liz. I didn't stay on your
Well, no,
topic.
but I'm not saying you were all over the map. You just know, but if somebody Googles you or looks up what you've done, you've been in more places than people could even imagine. And I imagine there's a lot of places that you can't even tell us that you've been. And I know from this hostage work that there have been times where I reached out to you while Abigail was a hostage since then with the work that I continue to do for advice or ideas.
Yeah.
And I had no idea where you were, but you answered or you called me back shortly. And I know that you were in some crazy place and trying to help people. Um, and I don't even know if your wife
Yeah.
knew where you were, but you were out there and you still are. And so while you answered it like that, that's really who you are. You hold so many truths and so many lanes, and you are just constantly trying to see what you can do to make other people's lives better.
I'm humbled to hear that from someone like you. So thank you. I usually try to demur or try to push away from a compliment, but hearing those kind words from someone like you, who again, you've essentially devoted your life to love, to helping those that are vulnerable. So thank you for those kind words. Hope I keep living up to them.
Well, listen, we all hope that after this, my last question will be about joy. How do you spread joy? But I hope that when people hear this, they will also feel like, you know what, I can go make a difference.
Yeah.
And I don't have to have some clear title or some clear direction. But I will just laugh and tell you that you were the class president at West Point, and I was a class president in high school. So we have one thing in
Hey.
common. I didn't jump out of airplanes. I am not a
Yeah.
military person, but I was a class president, and so I always try to find like connections between the people I have on and myself,
I'm not
just to
shocked.
humanize it a little bit. Um,
Of course you were class president. That's great.
yeah, of course, yeah. But I have a question. Did you have one teacher or someone that was your mentor in high school? Or, I mean, you read the magazines and you read the newspaper, and we didn't have like internet. So we were just focused on what the news was. And I believe the news was pure
Oh yeah.
back then. It was telling a pure story. But did you have a teacher that also just you think about now, it inspired you?
Yeah, it's funny. No one's ever asked me that question, and as you were asking, it went right to Mr. Trainer. Mr. Trainer was, probably he passed away a few years ago, but he's probably about 55 when I was going through high school. A man who'd been there, done that. A very kind and loving soul, gentle. And I had him for American AP history and European AP history the next year. And back then I was pretty conservative, and spouting off whatever young conservative kids do in high school. And he always took joy. I could see the glint in his eye asking the hard questions that you don't want to really answer or address when you're still
Yeah.
like trying to get the facts together and maybe glom onto a way of thought. And man, I appreciated that. I'd get all like flustered, my face would turn red, and I'd sputter around, about what the real causes of the Korean War were, or how the Army performed in Vietnam, an institution that I loved and was going to serve in. he would still poke me a little bit, like, the My Lai massacre, or else, how did the army do, et cetera. And those things were bothersome. And at the same time, you know, I think even at that moment, I realized that that's what it should be about. You should be able to have these conversations that take both sides, that encourage each other to grow, that engender spirited debate. And I would say Mr. Trainer got that out of me. I mean, he would not let me diatribe or really stand on a soapbox and just keep talking and talking and talking, kind of like I'm doing now. But he would actually stop, poke me a little bit, and then we'd talk. And I'd walk away feeling a little bruised, both in ego and mind. And yet I would say I am grateful that he did that. I'm going to say I was aware in the moment of what he was trying to do. And that made me appreciate him while I was with him and he was alive. I didn't have to think back 30 years later, oh, that's what he was trying to do. I knew in the moment that he was challenging me and that I would be stronger and better. And frankly, there are things that I believed wholeheartedly at age 16 and 17 that, based on my conversations with him, I started to question and don't believe in wholeheartedly. So I had a lot of really good teachers, but that's the one guy that I think took me to a higher plane and realized that, or helped me realize that there is goodness to be had in a honest discourse, in a dialogue between two sides that may not necessarily agree. So, if I could replicate him nowadays with all the antagonism that's out there, I wouldn't heartbeat, because I think he was ahead of his time. I think he knew the importance of having respect in a conversation.
Yeah, there's so much there. And I go back to like, I think about the current education and where, we aren't
Yeah,
pushing students sometimes to have uncomfortable conversations. We're not
yeah,
pushing them to become good listeners. We're giving them an out really quickly. And we see it in the news
yeah,
that, if you don't like something or somebody doesn't have your opinion, you don't have to listen, you just scream. And I think
yeah.
also what that does is set us off in the wrong direction. And then I want to just kind of bring it back to like the work you've done, which is to release, to save human lives, wasn't because you went out and screamed. It was because you went to places and had really hard conversations. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. But you brought home people like Brittany Griner. You brought home hostages, people that were either held hostage or wrongfully detained, and you ran a team in the US government under a Trump administration, under a Biden administration, and you were able to understand that at the end of the day, you had to work with really unruly, bad people, to get these hostages and to make deals. So when I hear about your experience with Mr. Trainer, I kind of think, wow, he's like one of the people that like pushed you to like think beyond just what you thought and you knew better.
Yeah.
So I just said a lot, but could you talk about now, like the work you did and that you've done to like bring people home? And that is so beautiful.
I'm going to say one thing, but then I want to get to what I really want to talk about. The thing that I would just harp at right away is that it was always a team effort. It was
Yeah.
never Roger Carson's doing it. And you're a perfect example of that in bringing Abigail home and some others around that time. There was absolutely no way just the US government could do it. I think it took Americans, the Israeli populace, the Palestinian populace, journalists, academics. I mean, there was really just this whole thing where the variables are so many, but they all seem to push together to allow a prisoner exchange or hostage exchange to take place. But it was the same with Brittany Griner. It was the same with, Evan Gershkovich or any of the other people we brought back. It was always this huge team effort. And I'm grateful that I had a chance to partner with you, not even just on Abigail's case, but on cases since. And I think in terms of the dialogue, where it was, so that's point one. Point two, in terms of the dialogue, when you do talk to someone, here's what I found doesn't work. If you go in and say, I'm Ambassador so and so, I'm with the United States of America, and your human right, the knife hand comes out. Your human rights record is horrible. You're a horrible person. You're tough. You're mistreating this. You've done this wrong. You did this wrong. And by the way, I want to get these two or three Americans out. Man, you're not going to get it. You're going to fail right there. And it's funny. The other side does it too. Every time you talk to a dictator or I would say an opponent in some of these places, they will usually go into a 20 to 40-minute dialogue explaining why the United States is bad and all the things that we've done in the past that have made our relationship so difficult. what I found was probably my best move is I would go in and be humble, be nice, listen, listen more, listen, comment on what they're saying. And after someone's harangued the United States for about 40 minutes, and by the way, I mean, if anyone probably has a tattoo of an American flag, it's me, right? I mean, I am so pro US, but of course they're going to say bad things about the country, right? And so at the very end of it, I wouldn't go right back into attack mode. I would try to like take it, listen, and then shift back into I want this American, this American, this American. How can we work well together? So I felt like being non-threatening, of being humble, of being easy to get along with was my best move. And we had some successes. I don't think I would have got there if would have went in guns a blazing, playing the battle hymn of Republic behind me. Now, do I feel that deep down in my heart? Of course I do. I love America, and I think we're awesome. But it's just not your pro move when talking to people on tough topics like this. And in doing so, you actually end up building trust and at times, strangely, friendships with the people on the other side. And that proved valuable because sometimes the other side will take Americans a year later or 2 years later. So to keep those relationships up and running, not necessarily a bad thing. When I go into a negotiation, I'll shut up after this. I don't have to tell them that America is powerful. They already know that. They know how many aircraft carriers we have. They know how many submarines that we have. They know what our military looks like. They understand the power of our culture, of our political system, of this, that, and the other. So I never felt like I had to go in and flex. And I didn't have to go in and brag about myself because they've already read my bio. And by the way, bios are bios. Half the stuff that you put in your bios are overinflated anyway. So I didn't want them to like be focused on that. I felt I could just go in and be me and not worry about that because they already know I'm representing the United States of America, and not having to tell them again and crinkle up my face and put the knife hand. I think gave me a good start. Now the negotiations after that still brutal, still hard, still tough, but at least I got that part out of the way and started to build a relationship with the other side.
Yeah, that's the humanity of it. They
Yeah,
they aren't necessarily good people because they've stolen people or they've taken
yeah,
people. But you still are doing a job, and if you treat them without humanity that maybe they don't earn, but that you treat them without it, I don't see where you can start a negotiation. Could you talk a little bit about, because a lot of people, you and I are talking like we know everything, like I know everything, which I don't. But what's the difference between being a hostage and being wrongfully detained? And why is it that Americans are prey to being taken?
yeah. Sure. A hostage is someone that's been taken by a terrorist group. So if JNIM or ISIS or Al Qaeda takes an American, it becomes an FBI hostage case, and then the FBI has the primacy in that case. And I assist in terms of the diplomatic effort, or at least in my former job, I did. A wrongful detainee is someone that's taken by a nation state like Russia or China or Venezuela. In that case, the State Department has primacy, and the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs has the lead role in conducting diplomatic engagements to bring those people out. And why do they want Americans? It runs the gamut. At the baseline, the other side wants to use an American as a bargaining chip to get something they want. It could be having to deal with oil exploration in that country. It could be with a treaty. It could be with trying to get one of their citizens out of our jails, but they want something for us. And so they'd arrest an American who's either innocent or went through a strange trial process. And we feel that this person should be let go. And then that's where the negotiation starts. The United States goes up to the other country and says, we think that this person has been wrongfully detained. We'd like to talk about getting them back. And the other side starts to bargain about what they want to get in that process. Having said that, there are times when an American gets arrested in, say, Russia, and I'm pretty sure that the Russians at times will arrest someone, and at the moment of arrest, they're not sure if that person's guilty or not. They're doing what they do in any police place, or any state, rather. They're arresting someone based on the evidence before them. And as they get this person, suddenly the FSB, the intelligence services, get word that an American's been arrested in, Yekaterinburg, and suddenly they're like, aha, hold on, don't let that person go. And then someone who may have been arrested and then have been let go after questioning instead is kept in detention And suddenly they're being accused of something like espionage by the Russian government. And now the race is on to try to find a way to get that person out.
When somebody says no, does that like a starting point for you in terms of negotiations a lot of times? Because I'm assuming that like the first response like to a lot of these is like, no, we're not going to work with you. No, we're not going to help you. And you have to continue. And I assume that that is something that not Mr. Trainer, but like, is that something you learned as a child? Because you have to be dogmatic. You can't give up.
I would say it's maybe it's more. So I was going to say special forces, but in special forces they don't train you to be that person. What it's more like they go through what's called assessment and selection. So if you have 100 people out there, if you assess all them and looking for certain attributes, you'll find that a certain percentage of that 100 people have the attributes that you want for your organization. And in special forces, one thing that we were looking for is someone who's comfortable in a chaotic and ambiguous environment. And that usually meant something that was someone that was also physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally resilient. So someone who's not going to quit, because you don't want to have your Green Berets or your SEALs, get close to the objective and suddenly go, man, I'm tired. I really feel like taking a nap or resting, right? You know what? We're always tired. Or I'm cold, I'm hungry. So you want to like select people that in a way are going to pursue the objective until its completion. And so maybe it's the kind of person that you are inherently in SF Special Forces. I guess maybe selected me for that reason. But then you go through a training process and you try to I guess, reinforce those things that make you not want to quit until the job's done. Having said that, you don't have to go be a special forces person. You are a good example of that. You're like, if I may, in the kindest, loving way, I'm going to say when you want to get something done, you're like a pit bull, and I would say a French pit bull or a French poodle, someone that just goes after it, but in the most elegant fashion. You don't quit. I've met people that are lawyers, people that are construction workers, taxi drivers, people, in other words, people that were either in the process of getting people out or people that were arrested or the family members of someone who was taken by a terrorist group or a nation state. These are people that were living their lives. Suddenly their son or daughter or husband or wife has been taken, and they may have been working for the city in Minot, North Dakota, or they may be retired, they may be a cab driver, and suddenly they are going to Capitol Hill, talking to congressmen, senators, trying to get to the president, trying to lobby me, trying to talk to the other side. So what I've found is, and I've been blessed to meet so many people in this country from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, from all religions, from all different various cultures, from the north, the south, the east, the west. And these people, once their loved ones are taken, you better watch out. They become a force to be reckoned with. And we tried to partner with them to get their loved ones home. So you start
Yeah.
off by paying me a compliment by saying I'm dogged and persistent. You bet I am. You cannot not pursue it. If an American's taken, you must pursue it as aggressively as possible to bring them home. You can never quit, never quit. But you're joined by so many people in the United States, especially those family members who are right there with you in the fight, and they don't quit either. It's an amazing transformation and a painful transformation, but an amazing one to watch a mother who might have been retired from as a school teacher suddenly becoming a mama bear again and going after the Russians to bring her son home.
Wow, I get the chills when you say that. And I think about one part, which is what this podcast is about, is like bridging the gap and you and your role and all these hostage families, whether they are the US
Yeah,
families and the international families that I was and I still am working with that go and meet with Democrats and Republicans or
yeah,
other hostages that we know that have been taken by Venezuela, Russia, North Korea. Like we have this American government, and you and I talk about how proud we are to be Americans because we have this American government that one doesn't leave anyone behind and has someone like
correct.
yourself in Spiha and a team because you had a great team, and many of those people are still on the current team fighting like crazy to bring home people from all over the world, Americans, but others as well, which is unique to
Yeah,
America. But I also see that that's one place where we've had respect and appreciation and working together between Dems and Republicans is on
yeah.
hostages. You don't usually see people going, no, we're not going to bring home hostages because we're one party. That to me is
Right.
something to celebrate and to talk about.
Yeah, Yeah.
But the thing that I want to say, Roger, and this goes back to talking about your heart and humanity and your team's heart and humanity, all the people, I can name names, but I'm not going to
Hmm.
because I want to
Hmm.
just keep this here
Yeah.
because I'll forget somebody and then I'll feel terrible. But all those people that you worked with, like, they reached out to these families. They checked in with them. The families could call them. And you are in a movie called Take No Prisoners. It's a
Yeah.
documentary about the work you did to bring home hostages, American wrongfully detained, excuse me, from Venezuela. And in that, what I also saw were these family members, and these were people living what I'll call just normal, not simple, but just lives that were not about being awesome. They didn't want to do social media. They weren't in the entertainment world. They weren't in
Right.
politics. They weren't in anything other than just day to day. And these families, what they did to bring home their loved ones day after day for hundreds of days in this movie, and your work with your team, just being there for them and from the beginning and then celebrating when their loved ones came home, being on the
Yeah.
plane, doing the transfer. It's a great movie, Take No Prisoners, because it's really truly about the work you did and your team, but it's about also the people.
Yeah.
Their lives matter. And that's why people fight like crazy. You know, Mama Bear, whatever you want to call it, like, it brings out in you
Hmm.
something that people never understood they had in them. Can you get to that place without having a tragedy or having someone be stolen? And that's kind of what my thoughts are. Like, how do we all rise to that occasion a bit without needing some tragedy? Because that is
Yeah.
what changes things. That's what brings home those people. If you were doing it alone, it wouldn't work. You need those family members.
Yeah.
Look at Diane Foley. I mean, what an incredible leader this woman is, and what a tragedy. And she still keeps leading. And she
Yeah.
still keeps doing this incredible work for others who will never maybe know who she was and what she went through, but it isn't about that.
Yeah. It's not about that. It's when we were, I guess when I first walked into the office, I talked to my chief of staff, Carol Lee Walker, and we talked about, how do we get more people involved so that the president feels more comfortable about making the hard decisions? Because by the time President Trump or President Biden, or if you want to go back in time, President Bush, President Obama, by the time they make this decision, usually they've been given a lot of bad options that they're going to get their American back, but they either have to send military force or they have to do an uncomfortable trade. It's seldom a good feeling when you bring someone back in terms of what you have to do to bring them back. It's wonderful to get them back, but the deal's usually kind of ugly. And we both read a book by a person who gave the story about the French government, how the French government rallied the entire French populace around trying to get some of their citizens out of Africa. And so when the French president made some hard decisions, the whole country was behind him. And that kind of helped SPIHA evolve from an organization that conducted negotiations in smoke-filled back rooms to one that was willing to go on CNN, on 60 Minutes, on PBS, on Yahoo News to kind of get the story out there, and one that took pleasure, and we were proud of family members who articulated the desire to get their loved ones home. A family member would come up and say, Roger, I have a chance to go on CNN. Should I go on CNN? And I would say, absolutely. In fact, feel free to tell them that Roger Carstens is not doing his job. In other words, it doesn't matter what you say, but get this in the news, try to get everyone else involved. And what you found was people that did not have their loved ones taken were now invested. They wanted to bring Brittany Griner home. They wanted to bring Abigail home. They wanted to bring Evan Gershkovich home. They wanted to bring people that, as you kind of hinted at, their loved ones aren't famous. They're not rich. They're not connected, but their loved ones are taken. And the United States owes them their best effort. We owe that citizen their loved one, regardless of whether they're famous or connected or not. And as people started to embrace this, I think we put the president of the United States in a better place to make the hard decisions. But I think I got to see people that didn't know about this topic, whose loved ones are not taken, suddenly becoming leaders in this sphere, per your point. But maybe I'll even say the broader point. I'll hit this. Um, if you are out there and listening to this, there are things that animated you in your youth when you were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. The things that excited you and animated, at times they slip away, but remind yourself what those are and then go find how to get involved in those things. And you'll find yourself being a leader in short order. There are things that excite us, whether it's education, whether it's helping those who are more vulnerable, whether it's politics. It could be anything, but remind yourself what you were passionate about and go jump into that and start exhibiting that love and that leadership that Liz talks about so much.
Thank you. Speaking of jumping, I also I never jumped out of an airplane, but I know you jumped out of some airplanes
It's highly
to
overrated.
highly overrated. Okay, well,
Yeah, it
still,
is.
it sounds good. So Roger Carstens jumped out of planes to
Uh-huh.
save lives. This is a question I ask everybody.
Mhm.
What is the worst advice you've received? The best advice you've received? Because you kind
Ooh,
of
I'm writing
just
that one down. Yeah.
advice of like going and like imagining who you were at 15, 16, 17, and trying to be that self and going. But what advice did you not take because it was horrible? And what advice did you take because it was great?
I think anytime, I'm going to go broad and say anytime that someone's told me to manipulate the system, do this trick or tell this person that in order to manipulate this conversation. And it's usually stuff you can find in business books, you can find it in other podcasts. There are ways that you can outmaneuver people. And I know it works for some people, and but that's fine. It's never worked for me. So anytime anyone's given me the advice to try to outmaneuver someone by guile, I would say that's been bad advice. And that's weird because in special forces, some of the things that we're taught is if we're fighting an enemy, how you actually can destabilize your enemy and shift them and try to gain the advantage. But I would say that in personal relationships and professional relationships, and this gets into the best advice, I've had one or two people suggest that the best way to meet with people, even on tough topics, is to just be fully transparent. So imagine this. I come back from a negotiation and the National Security Council folks are like, so what did you tell the bad guys? And I said, well, I told them we're willing to do this, this, and this if they do that, that, and that. And they're like, oh my gosh, you can't tell them that. You have to play this game. And I was like, no, because over time, they're going to look upon all the Americans that they've talked to and all the Americans that they are or could be talking to. I want them to remember one thing. We trust Roger Carstens because he doesn't lie or try to pull the wool over eyes. And I think in being transparent and honest, even with your enemies, even with those who you're negotiating with, and even on tough topics, it's always benefited me to follow the advice to be honest, transparent, and humble versus try to plot, scheme, and outmaneuver. So my worst advice that I've received is plot and scheme against people, even your enemies. The best advice I've received is treat everyone kindly, be humble, be transparent, show them your cards, and just get the job done, even with your enemies.
Wow, that's very special. And I also want to ask you, how many people did you help bring home while you were Spiha?
I'm glad you said help bring home because that gets into that just part of a
Yeah,
team thing.
and listen,
Yeah.
Roger, there's one thing I learned in this whole thing. It's teamwork and
Uh,
networking. And we also, you and I have talked about this.
mhm,
Everybody does a push. You reach out to anybody and everybody, and you just
mhm.
don't know what gets sometimes it over the finish line.
Oh my gosh. That's worthy of a tattoo as well. That's 100% right. You never know. The variables are too many. Gosh, what'd you ask? I forgot.
People did you bring home?
Oh,
No,
that's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
again, I talk about this because this is over
Yeah.
two different presidents, two different
Yeah.
parties, still united, and that you were a
Uh,
part of this incredible teamwork. And how many people?
So I think it's the official number is like 65, but there I will say I had the chance to participate in bringing over 220 people home from Nicaragua. There are people that we don't talk about that we helped other countries bring home. That the other countries, we want to, pay homage to the fact that they had the lead, and so there are numbers that I just would never throw up on the board,
Yeah,
but we were right there with them in the negotiation or negotiating on their behalf, trying to pull them in. I guess 65 officially, probably a few hundred after that. But again, just humbled that I had the chance to serve two presidents in this role. Humble I had a chance to serve the American taxpayer. Hope I gave him and her a good return on their investment. And grateful just to have been a part of the team that brought him home. Really.
thank you. Okay, so now we're going to switch
Mhm.
180 degrees. I'm going to do rapid questions just to get to
Oh
know
boy.
Roger,
Okay.
fun stuff, and let's do it.
Yeah.
What is Roger's favorite sound?
Oh my goodness.
Your kids fighting? I'm just kidding.
Actually, I was going to say the sound of them sleeping next to me when they were little babies. The sound of a little kid sleeping next to you. It's a beautiful sound.
How
I
old are
don't
the
I don't
kids
hear
now?
it anymore. That's like I
No,
have
how old?
four. They're four. That's like 25, 20, 25, 20, and 14 and 12. So yeah, I'm long
Yeah.
past hearing that sound, but it was definitely special when it happened.
Favorite color?
Aqua. It's strange. It's the color that I put in my West Point ring. So when you get your West Point ring, people get like, I don't have it. I don't even know where it is right now, but people get like black or something else. And I went for aqua because it reminded me of like a Caribbean beach, tranquil waters. It put me at peace to like see that color.
Wow. In the middle of like being in incredibly tough places, that gave you a
Right?
calmness.
Aqua.
I love it. Favorite scent or
Cinnamon.
smell? That's a good one.
Mhm.
Who is your biggest cheerleader?
Gosh, I want to say my wife Melissa. She's been incredible. She's supported me and been a person that I could always count on for good advice, tough advice. And when things got tough, she was always willing to like push me a little harder or give me the oasis that I needed to recharge.
And I didn't talk about that because we talked about so much, but
Mm.
just like the role that she plays and played in terms of like all your crazy travel, helping, like raising the kids when you weren't there, but
Yeah,
also understanding like the dangers that you did put yourself in for our country. And that takes a lot from a partner. That's a pretty impressive partner. And while she's a cheerleader, she also is somebody that was on, I'm sure, has been honest with you as well.
yeah. I mean, she's when I talk about the team that brings people home, I count my family in that because they paid some prices. I was just gone, and my wife had to do everything, from pay the bills to make sure the kids got here, there, and the other. And whether I was in a foreign country for 70% of the time, or whether when I was home, I was coming home at 9 o'clock at night, she kept everything up and running and going. And it's almost too much to ask of anyone, but she did it and, did so in a loving manner.
I love it. Favorite meal? One meal, your favorite meal.
Gosh, I would have said filet mignon, but I would say as I crest age 60, I'm just not really into eating like big meals anymore. So, favorite meal might be like a smoothie from Robux with like peanut butter and caffeine in it. So, isn't that a
Love
horrible
the
answer? Yeah,
caffeine
it's
a little.
like, I mean, I used to
Is
love
that
the idea of like a filet mignon, like asparagus, béarnaise
nice?
sauce, a nice atmosphere, a glass of red wine. And now, like, I just don't have the time or the inclination to eat such a heavy meal, like a smoothie. Yeah, that's more my style now.
Is the smoothie included in my next question? What is your favorite dessert?
Oh my goodness. Anything chocolate. They make a delicious chocolate cake at Wegmans that my wife buys me for my birthday every year, and that's the one time where I just like diets aside, dig right into it. So I love chocolate.
Favorite TV show or shows when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, Star Trek. I loved it because of the leadership. 87 episodes of Star Trek, and when I think about some of the things I thought about what it means to provide selfless service to a cause. That was, Captain James T. Kirk and Spock. But Star Trek was also fascinating because of the fight between reason and intuition, to where Spock was pure reason. Kirk seemed to be like pretty much on full intuition. And boy, that's a lesson that stayed with me. Whether you're in combat or whether you're, frankly, if you're loving another human being, or if you're trying to decide what to do with your life, or you're negotiating, I think you have to be pretty clear on when it's time to be fully rational and whether it's time to hit that switch and start being more intuitive. And Star Trek was right there to teach me all those. So I'll just stick with one, Star Trek.
I love that. It's a lot, and I think for people like growing up now, like maybe they haven't had the Star Trek, so maybe they go and binge Star Trek.
Well, I tried to get my kids interested in the '60s version, and they just didn't have time for it. So it's like, I
Okay.
think something about the '60s version just didn't really hit the newer generation, but they're great.
What is a book that you've read that is something like recently or that you recommend to others to read?
Oh, I'd say probably anything on the shelf behind me, but I think these ones here. I love Thucydides, the Peloponnesian Wars, Herodotus, the histories, Clausewitz on war. It's funny, I'm not even looking at them. I'm like looking at the very back based on the titles there. Julius Caesar, is and we
So
describe some
like
of his campaigns.
wars and wars in the
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, to me, war. It's especially like the Peloponnesian Wars. It's such human interaction. It is. They do have stories of love, of being deprived, of vulnerable situations. But boy, if you read the Peloponnesian Wars, it was written about 400 years BC, and it might as well have been written today. Everything that we see takes place in the Peloponnesian Wars. And when you read about Clausewitz, everything that you see in war, conflict, and humanity, it's right there. The masters figured it out. And when you read about them, I think you're allowed to think a little more deeply about what's going on there. I wish I had something that was more fluffy. If there's one thing I did in my youth was I read. And when I was 17, I seemed to push away from fiction and embrace nonfiction because of the
Yeah.
press of being a soldier, an officer, and then later a nonprofit guy and a diplomat. But when I think about the novels I might have written, it's hard to like really bring them to mind. But when I think about the ones that changed my life, I would say they were nonfiction and dealing with the essential issues of humanity.
Okay, from craziness to exercise. Do you do any exercise?
Before I took the job as SPIA, I used to work out 2 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. When I took the job, I tried. I don't think I succeeded very well. If I were to show you this wreck that I'm in, I'm going to whip this around very quickly. You'll see like this is not only an office, but it's a home gym, squat
Great.
rack. We have this little thing called Bob. I used to beat on him every now and then, but he was actually pretty tough on me. But
Okay.
yeah, weightlifting, cardio, 6 days a week. Then I took the job of Spiha, and it just became a lot harder because you help get someone home, or do you go work out? Well, you help someone get someone home, and so that takes a second place. And since leaving the job in January, I've been trying to get back in shape and lose some of the 25 pounds that I stacked on over a 5 year period in that job. But I want to get back to lifting weights and running and doing all that fun stuff.
Well, I at least you have the facility and you've got a sparring partner I see there. I ask everybody what their favorite household chore is. Do you have one?
Oh yeah, I love to do the dishes. And in fact, I've only missed one plane flight in my life, and it was because my wife's like, we got to go, and I was just in my Zen point doing the dishes, and I probably spent an extra 10 or 20 minutes doing them than I should have. But and my wife, if she was here right now, she'd say that's not true. I don't do the dishes. I don't like doing them, but I actually do enjoy doing them. I also like vacuuming. Put on these little things right here, put some music on, and vacuum. So those are probably my two favorites.
Okay, good.
I can't wait
And
for her to
what is your,
see.
yeah, no, no, I will, we'll have another
Yeah.
review and see if she agrees with everything. We've had that with
Yeah.
different partners.
Oh boy.
Um, eh, so what is your superpower? I know that some people have called you Captain America because you have brought home their loved ones.
Mhm.
Can we just leave it at Captain America or do you have a different superpower?
Oh, thank you for that. Geez, I'll take that any day. I think a superpower is empathy, and not so much that I'm trying to put myself in someone's shoes, but I think that the thing that I tried to bring to this job and that I tried to hire people for was people that had empathy, because in a way, the easy part is negotiating with the other side. It's much harder to negotiate in Washington D.C., and it's much, much, much harder to talk to a family member. And you can imagine, and you've been there, Liz. You talk to a family member that tears are streaming down their face, and they're just sitting there with their lips quivering, saying, "When are you going to bring my son home?" Or "Why is it taking so long?" And if you're not empathetic, you're going to go straight into government speech. I've heard it. It's like, well, there are things that you don't understand, or the other side saying, you don't want that. When you're in that position, you want someone to say, I know, we owe you more. And then you want a hug. You want someone that's going to cry with you. And I would say, and it can't be fake, because the families smell fakeness. If you're fake in a conversation, they know it immediately. So you have to be like legit empathetic and legit passionate and caring about these families. Otherwise, you could not work in Spiha. And what was the prime thing that we hired people for? We wanted go-getters. We wanted people in the Get Shit Done Club, and we found those people. But if they weren't empathetic, you could not work for me. You had to be the type of person who was willing to cry with another human in pain. And the US government doesn't pay you to do that. They don't care if you cry or not. But boy, I did. So even though I worked for the government, I made sure that everyone that walked into my office was willing to cry and embrace a family in pain from a place of honesty and authenticity. And so if I had a superpower, and I'm not sure I'd call it that, is, when someone's crying before me, I'm going to be right there with them to the extent that I can, because, they need that. And me as the government back then, I felt I owed them that.
Yes, and I just know from experience when Noah and I came in and we both cried. Noah cried a lot more, but we both cried. And
Yeah.
you were there. Charlotte was there at that time, and
Yeah.
we were just
Yeah.
given warmth and in the same moment, Roger, I still remember you saying this is not a sprint; it is a marathon. And
Yeah.
Abigail being stolen 51 days after witnessing her parents' murder, and us fighting for
Yeah.
her and all the others. was at that moment so overwhelming and so sad. And there you were with warmth, but also honesty. And, I think about now where we are, over 650 days since then and what these families are still going through. And you're right.
Yeah.
They need honesty. And
Yeah.
and they need empathy because it is just too cruel. So just want to say thank you because this is that what you said is true. And I unfortunately can
I know you lived
vouch
through
for
it.
it.
You're talking. I mean, maybe just if anyone does get to see the film, Take No Prisoners. I go out to see the family of Evan Hernandez, who was taken by the Maduro regime, and I'm sitting there with 12 people, to include his mother, and the mom did cry, and she says, "When are you going to bring my son home?" I know up until then we had an hour of maybe some warmth and some gentle laughs, but I had to be honest, and I had to say, this is a marathon. Buckle in. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be hard. And, a lot of the people there, the 12 people, five of them left the room in tears.
Mm.
But, you owe them that. You got to be honest. It doesn't help to lie about this, but you also got to be willing to understand what they're going through. And yeah, just horrible. Yeah, it's funny. People are like, "Oh, did you like your job?" No, I didn't enjoy. To be honest, I didn't enjoy my job. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. I didn't wake up like excited to go to work because it was a good time. I felt fulfilled. I felt like it was where I needed to be. But the job was good for a few seconds every now and then when you got to see a husband and wife crash into each other. The husband comes back from China, gets off the plane, crashes into the wife that he hasn't seen in like 5 or 6 years. And for that 20 or 30-second period, the job's worth it. But every second prior and every second after sucked. It's a brutal job, but it's doesn't matter. It's hard, but it's got to get done. And I was grateful to have the opportunity to do it on behalf of the American people. And grateful to partner again. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm grateful to have met you and partnered with you on this. I look at still look at this book. Abigail wouldn't be home without you.
Thank you.
You'd like to think the government was that good that we could do it by ourselves. We can't. It's got to be a partnership that expands businesses, Congress, the media, nonprofits, and family members. And in partnering with you, I think you got to see it. Abigail wouldn't be. You probably never want to say it, but Abigail wouldn't be home without you. She wouldn't.
Yeah.
And there are other people that wouldn't be home without their loved ones, just pounding the pavement every day, making it happen. And I'd like to get to the point where that doesn't happen. That if you
That
entrust the
you're
government to get your loved ones back, say again.
all out. That we're all out of business.
Yeah. Can't wait. Anyway, I know I'm talking too much. I feel bad.
No,
You
no.
asked me a question. I talked for 10 minutes. So
I could go on and on, but we're gonna just go to the last question, which I think, while you say that the work wasn't happy work, but it was
yeah,
meaning 65 people and hundreds of others whose names we will not know came
yeah,
back and got to come home because of your efforts. So even though it wasn't like I wake up in the morning happy, you made a difference in so many people's lives. And, for me, that's something to talk about forever and ever. What can we
yeah.
do to keep making people's lives better? My last question, which I asked everyone, so I'm going to end on this, is what does joy mean to you? What brings you joy? It could be professionally or personally. And how do you share that joy? Because I believe if we share joy with others, then we are actually putting such good energy into the world.
I'll give you a quick answer, and yet I'll probably think about that over the next few days.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've thought about that because it's not been important to me, and it should be. What brings me joy? I think since I've been 17, I went to West Point. Joy became a low priority, and mission focus became higher. And maybe I could say mission focus, succeeding the mission, or doing your best provides a modicum of joy. But I can't say when to watch a loved one return to their loved ones on a recovery brought me an immense amount of joy, even though it was very short. Seeing the families after, like to go to the Foley event every year, or Hostage US event, and run into these family members and hug and cry and laugh that their loved ones are home. That brings me a lot of joy. And I take my family to the Foley event every year because I want them to feel it and see it and maybe appreciate it. So maybe that's sharing it. But I have to say, you've challenged me. I'm going to have to go back and maybe at age 60, think about what joy means now. I'm not sure I've really thought about that in a long time. And, I probably should. And I like that. I like your idea of spreading it. I think,
Yeah.
if anything, we've become friends. We've become friends. We have not just had one-offs. You and I've actually devoted and invested time in each other, and in getting to know you, I've kind of watched your leadership. And if you're asking me what joy means, it must be an important question. So
Yeah.
Liz, you've given me a homework assignment. I'm going to go
Good.
remake it.
Good. Listen, I think that it's something that is for me constantly what is joy,
Yeah.
because every day is a different day. But I think it's a way, it's a like a northern star for us, because joy is
Oh, I love
something
that.
you cannot put into some, like, into a
Yeah.
box or into my coffee cup, but it is truly something that is magical and is inspiring and is so meaningful. So we've
Can I ask
given you some.
what gives you joy? I know we're like almost out of time or out of time, but what gives you joy?
First, when I am with all my kids, or when I see my kids doing well, and they're all older now, it gives me joy. When I
Mm,
see Abigail and her siblings and all the
yeah.
kids who survived October 7th laughing and playing and just being kids, that brings me joy. And I think that really what also just brings me joy is, like, sometimes, Roger, it's like a fleeting moment, but like you go into like a market, or you go into a store and somebody looks so miserable, and you just say hi and you smile and you say, how are you today? And they go and they smile, and you
Yeah.
know that all it
Yeah.
was just sticking in, and that gives me joy. And
Mm,
that's a simple, and it goes back to, and you talked about it from the beginning, and we'll just
mm,
end on this: kindness, and
kindness.
hearing
Yeah.
people and seeing them.
Yeah.
And that is what gives me a
I
great
like
amount of joy.
kindness and seeing. I'm taking notes here as you're talking. I'm going to say my last part is, you know what will give me joy? Don't worry, I'm not going to undress, but I can't wait to give these back to Adon. I've been wearing them forever. He has mine. We did a trade, even though he didn't know about it. I gave it to his dad, but I know he's in New Jersey now. I'm going to go back and give these to him. Stop wearing
That's
these, and I'm going to feel great joy to see his face and give him a hug.
on that one. Thank you. You are my hero, and I
And you're
appreciate
mine.
you. Thank you. I hope to see you soon and have coffee in real person. And until then, take good
I'm looking
care.
forward to that.
Thank you for sharing your heart and your humanity with me and with everyone today. Bye. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.